Book Second. He advances to puberty, and indeed to the early part of the 16th year of his age, in which, having abandoned his studies, he indulged in lustful pleasures, and with his companions committed theft. Chapter 1. He deplores the wickedness of his youth. I will now call to mind my past foulness, and the carnal corruptions of my soul, not because I love them, but that I may love thee, O my God. For love of thy love I do it. For love of thy love do I it, recalling in the very bitterness of my remembrance my most vicious ways, that thou mayest grow sweet to me, thou sweetness without deception, thou sweetness happy and assured, and collecting myself out of that my dissipation, in which I was torn to pieces, while turned away from thee the one, I lost myself among many vanities. For I even longed in my youth formerly to be satisfied with worldly things, and I dared to grow wild again in the various and shadowy loves. My form consumed away, and I became corrupt in thine eyes, pleasing myself and eager to please in the eyes of man. Chapter 2. Stricken with exceeding grief, he remembers the dissolute passions in which, in his 16th year, he used to indulge. But what is it that I delighted in, save to love and to be loved? But I held it not in moderation, mind to mind, the bright path of friendship, but out of the dark concupiscence of the flesh and the effervescence of youth, exhalations came forth which obscured and overcast my heart, so that I was unable to discern pure affection from unholy desire. Both boiled confusedly within me, and dragged away my unstable youth into the rough places of unchaste desires, and plunged me into a gulf of infamy. Thy anger had overshadowed me, and I knew it not. I was become deaf by the rattling of the chains of my mortality, the punishment for my soul's pride, and I wandered farther from thee, and thou didst suffer me, and I was tossed to and fro, and wasted, and poured out, and boiled over in my fornications, and thou didst hold thy peace, O thou my tardy joy. Thou then didst hold thy peace, and I wandered still further from thee, into more and more barren seed plots of sorrows, with proud dejection and restless lassitude. Oh for one to have regulated my disorder, and turned to my profit the fleeting beauties of the things around me, and fixed a bound to their sweetness, so that the tides of my youth might have spent themselves upon the conjugal shore. If so be, they could not be tranquilized and satisfied within the object of a family, as thy law appoints, O Lord, who thus formest the offspring of our death, being able also with a tender hand to blunt the thorns which were excluded from thy paradise. For thy omnipotency is not far from us, even when we are far from thee. Else in truth ought I more vigilantly to have given heed to the voice from the clouds. Nevertheless, such shall have trouble in the flesh, but I spare you. And it is good for a man not to touch a woman. And he that is unmarried careth for the things that belong to the Lord, how he may please the Lord. But he that is married careth for the things that are of the world, how he may please his wife. I should therefore have listened attentively to these words, and being severed for the kingdom of heaven, the heaven's sake, I would with greater happiness have expected thy embraces. But I, poor fool, seethed as does the sea, and, forsaking thee, followed the violent course of my own stream, and exceeded all thy limitations. Nor did I escape thy scourges. For what mortal can do so? But thou wert always by me, mercifully angry, and dashing with the bitterest vexations all my illicit pleasures, in order that I might seek pleasures free from vexation. But where I could meet with such except in thee, Lord, I could not find, except in thee, who teachest by sorrow, and woundest us to heal us, and killest us that we may not die from thee. Where was I, and how far was I exiled from the delights of thy house in that 16th year of age of my flesh, when the madness of lust, to which human shamelessness granteth full freedom, although forbidden by thy laws, held complete sway over me, and I resigned myself entirely to it? Those about me, meanwhile, took no care to save me from ruin by marriage, their sole care being that I should learn to make a powerful speech and become a persuasive orator. So I think this is a useful juxtaposition he's making between basically the spiritual bankruptcy of education, even back then apparently, that education, focused as it is not on the affections of the heart, but rather just this actually runs roughshod against what he was saying previously. The kinds of stories that you read matter because they set the affections of the heart. Just getting your book learning, through learning your letters isn't enough. Your affections have to be set. Now maybe that's an argument for having better works to read, but maybe works that don't encourage the indulgence of the passions. But I don't know. It's interesting. Chapter 3. Concerning his father, a freeman of Thagast, the assister of his son's studies, and on the admonitions of his mother on the preservation of chastity. And for that year my studies were intermitted, while after my return from Madara, a neighboring city whither I had begun to go in order to learn grammar and rhetoric, the expenses for a further residence at Carthage were provided for me, and that was rather by the determination than by the means of my father, who was but a poor freeman of Thagast. To whom do I narrate this? Not unto thee, my God, but before thee unto my own kind, even to that small part of the human race who may chance to light upon these my writings. And to what end? That I and all who read the same may reflect out of what depths we are to cry unto thee. For what cometh nearer to thine ears than a confessing heart and a life of faith? It's true. For who did not extol and praise my father, in that he went even beyond his means to supply his son with all the necessaries for a far journey for the sake of his studies? For many far richer citizens did not the like for their children. But yet this same father did not trouble himself how I grew toward thee, nor how chaste I was, so long as I was skillful in speaking. However barren I was to thy tilling, O God, who art the sole true and good Lord of my heart, which is thy field. Thy field. But while in that 16th year of my age I resided with my parents, having holiday from school for a time, this idleness being imposed upon me by my parents' necessitous circumstances, the thorns of lust grew rank over my head, and there was no hand to pluck them out. Moreover, when my father, seeing me at the baths, perceived that I was becoming a man, and was stirred with a restless youthfulness, he, as if from this anticipating future descendants, joyfully told it to my mother, rejoicing in that intoxication wherein the world so often forgets thee, its creator, and falls in love with thy creature instead of thee, from the invisible wine of its own perversity, turning and bowing down to the most infamous things. But in my mother's breast thou hadst even now begun thy temple, and the commencement of thy holy habitation, whereas my father was only a catechumen as yet, and that but recently. She then started up with a pious fear and trembling, and although I had not yet been baptized, she feared those crooked ways in which they walk who turn their back to thee, and not their face. Woe is me! And dare I affirm that thou heldest thy peace, O my God, while I strayed farther from thee? Didst thou... So his dad caught him masturbating? And was celebrated over it? Bizarre. Didst thou then hold thy peace to me? And whose words were they? And whose words were they, but thine, which by my mother, thy faithful handmaid, thou pouredest into my ears, none of which sank into my heart to make me do it? For she despised, and I remember privately warned me with a great solicitude not to commit fornication, but above all things never to defile another man's wife. These appeared to me but womanish counsels, which I should blush to obey. But they were thine, and I knew it not, and I thought that thou heldest thy peace, and that it was she who spoke, through whom thou heldest not thy peace to me, and in her person was despised by me, her son, the son of thy handmaid, thy servant. But this I knew not, and rushed on headlong with such blindness that amongst my equals I was ashamed to be less shameless. When I heard them plumbing themselves upon their disgraceful acts, yea, the glorying all the more in the proportion to the greatness of their baseness, and I took pleasure in doing it, not for the pleasure's sake only, but for the praise. What is worthy of dispraise but vice? But I made myself out worse than I was, in order that I might not be dispraised. And when in anything I had not sinned as the abandoned ones, I would affirm that I had done what I had not, and I might not appear abject for being more innocent, or of less esteem for being more chaste. Behold, with what companions I walked the streets of Babylon, on whose filth I was rolled, as if in cinnamon and precious ointments, and that I might cleave the more tenaciously to its very center, my invisible enemy trod me down and seduced me, I being easily seduced. Nor did the mother of my flesh, although she herself had ere this fled out of the midst of Babylon, progressing, however, but slowly in the skirts of it, in counseling me to chastity, so bear in mind what she said, what she had been told about me by her husband, as to restrain in the limits of conjugal affection, if it could not be cut away to the quick, what she knew to be destructive in the present and dangerous in the future. But she took no heed of this, for she was afraid lest a wife should prove a hindrance and a clog to my hopes. Oh, wow. Not those hopes of the future world which my mother had in thee, but the hope of learning, which my parents were too anxious that I should acquire. He, because he had little or no thought of thee, and but vain thoughts for me; she, because she calculated that those usual courses of learning would not only be no drawback, but rather a furtherance toward my attaining thee. For thus I conjecture, recalling as well as I can the dispositions of my parents. The reins, meantime, were slackened toward me beyond the restraint of due severity, that I might play, yea, even to dissoluteness in whatsoever I fancied. And in all there was a mist, a shutting out from my sight the brightness of thy truth, O my God, and my iniquity displayed itself as from very fatness. Chapter 4 will be read another time.